Thank you. I've been told that this session is competing with Anurag Kashyap in the next room. And those of you who didn't get tempted by Anurag Kashyap, thank you for staying back. We'll try and make it worth your while. Once again, let me introduce our panelist, Vikas Pandey, Senior Digital Producer at BBC India and a virtual reality filmmaker. He was formerly the South Asia reporter for the Press Association. Chirdeep Shetty is the CEO of Quintype, a technology startup that builds products in the digital media space. Some of the leading digital distributors, such as Bloomberg, Quint, Swaraja, and Fortune India, use his platform. Francesca Panetta is the executive editor of virtual reality at The Guardian. She's a multi-award-winning digital artist and journalist and has led immersive innovation at The Guardian for the last 10 years. Samir Patil is the founder and CEO and publisher at Scroll.in, an independent news venture. Before Scroll, Samir founded ACK Media, which you might know in its previous avatar as Amar Chitrakatha, which grew to become India's largest children's media company. Samir, first question for you. You're the only man in the jacket and formally dressed like me, so you get the first question. So Marshall McLuhan, media guru philosopher, said that the medium is the message. What message is the medium, especially digital media, giving out these days?
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if it's a very good message, but I think it's giving a message of, some kind of attention deficit. It's probably because the way we consume media has changed, and I think the medium being the message is like at this point half true, in the sense it is the message, but it's no longer a sufficient description of it because we are not separated from our media even for a minute, right? So maybe the receiver of the message is also become part of this whole cycle, right? So media was a message kind of worked when there was mass media and we switched off things, but now we don't even switch them off. So I don't know to what extent this sort of statement.
Nice. The media is the consumer.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
Francesca, similar question to you. Somebody talked about attention deficit disorder, and this is something we keep hearing from everybody who's in the digital news space saying attention spans were 30 seconds, now they're down to 22, soon we'll be at goldfish level at 5 seconds. And yet, I'm going to do a quick poll here. How many in this room have seen Sacred Games? How many have seen Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones and Sacred Games. Game of Thrones, people have watched 60 hours of it. And Sacred Games, 10 hours. And how many of you binge watched it? More than one episode at a time. So here's attention span. I'm willing to watch something for 10 hours if it's interesting, but not for 30 seconds if it's not interesting. Is this what modern media is talking about when they speak about attention deficit disorder? That the creators are merely not making things interesting enough?
I think it depends on the medium that's being used, as well as the attention, because I think it's a really good example of how people are prepared to stick with content. The virtual reality content we've been making at The Guardian is on average about 10 minutes long, and people really stick with it, and their attention actually can't be taken anywhere else because you've got these kind of large goggles on your face. You're forced to be not checking your phone and your social media accounts. And what's been interesting is the studies that have been done which show the impact. The BBC did a fantastic report which showed that the impact from this kind of immersive technologies is significantly larger than the other kind of fast to consume technologies. So I think that it's both the content, the quality of the content as you allude to, but also the medium itself.
Chirdeep Shetty, next question for you. Ever since the printing press, every innovation in media has been hailed as the next big thing. The printing press is going to change everything. Television is going to change everything. The internet is going to change everything. And today we are saying digital is going to change everything. Why is WhatsApp or digital media any different from the printing press in terms of innovation quality? Is this era any different?
Actually, this era is a lot different. So yes, each one had a leapfrog moment in time. Printing press had a leapfrog moment at that point in time. And now what we see with digital media, particularly in WhatsApp and all of the social channels, is the reach that you can get and the scale that you can get is a lot more than anything else. So I could be traveling around the world but still be reading news, vernacular news from anywhere out there, right? That is a game changer. And something that WhatsApp is doing, and mainly with social as well, is now that your consumers are becoming your distributors themselves. It's not just your distributors based on paper channels or whatever distribution channels you're using. Your consumers, as they like news, they like to share it. And they internally get that reward point saying that I've read this news, I would like to share this kind of news. So that your distribution channel starts growing exponentially in that sense. So that's the game changer in this way.
And quite often people are distributing it without having read it. I get a whole bunch of Twitter links saying read this 17-page article, long form to understand nuance, which most people who forward it haven't actually read it.
Absolutely.
It's just for positioning to make me seem like a cool intellectual that I forwarded that.
It's always this double-edged sword, so you have to deal with that.
Well, let me bring in Vikas Pandey. Vikas, question for you is simple. Name the top 5 technologies in your experience that are going to impact news production and dissemination in the next few years.
I'll be a little biased. I'll say VR and AR.
Okay.
Right from the top.
And for those of us who don't know what AR actually means.
So, I mean, how many of you have experienced any kind of virtual reality or AR content?
Most Indian news channels sound like virtual reality these days. We switch on the TV at 9 o'clock, so I don't know what that.
So I won't go into that. So quite a few of you are aware. It's basically a medium which allows you to be completely immersed into a story. If you're watching something on TV, a documentary, you are a passive observer. But what VR allows you to be inside the story. So what VR allows you to be inside the story, and no other medium at the moment is capable of doing that. And then it makes you think, it makes you empathize, it makes you connect with your characters like no other medium. So I'll just stick to VR and AR.
Alright, so VR and AR, 2 key technologies. AR, of course, is augmented reality. Can you tell us how augmented reality works?
So basically, VR is something you film, like 360 content that you see on social platforms or you experience in your headset. AR, as the name suggests, augmented reality, where you create a scenario. So I can talk about a BBC film that we did called Traffic, where we recreated journey of a girl from Syria to Europe and what she had to go through. Now, in one of the scenes in that film where she was kept in a really small room in Europe and she was sexually assaulted. Now, it can be trivial if you want to recreate, but we did recreate, and a lot of people who watched it told us later on that they had to think really long and hard that how could a human being survive in a 4x4 room. Now, no other medium can make it happen, and that sort of an impact AR can have on really important stories like Syria.
Samir, same question to you, but slightly different. You're an investor in news and media. What's on your radar? What technologies are on your radar that could sort of render what you do obsolescent?
Yeah, so I don't think of, I have other investors, so I'm not the investor. I just
That's what all investors say. I'm not the only investor. There are others.
I'm not even any investor. I'm just the person who has spent all the time trying to think of it. So really not the investor. So think of me as the producer. So I think I will differ a little bit on this. My sense is there are 2 big problems. I will start not with the technology, but the problem that media has to solve. There seem to be 2 big challenges. Since we are talking about newsroom tech, it's not fully relevant to it, but still relevant. Which is, how does one make money in this new digital media landscape, and what are the relevant technologies there? And the second is, how do you, I would say, regain the trust of the audience, and also, the onslaught of fake news and deep fakes in the future. So to me, those are 2 gigantic problems, and technology directly plays into some of them. And if I had to look forward from here, I would say, what are the kind of things? So in my way of thinking, if I go back to the first question, how does one make money from media in general, but also news media? I think there are 2-3 big things happening there. One, especially in India, there's this new payments infrastructure that has come up that makes it much easier. And I think you'll see lots of smaller, especially publishers being able to tap that. So that's interesting. Second is that I think advertisers already have very big platforms to advertise on. I don't think anybody here will have the scale anywhere rivaling Facebook or Google or so on. So publishers will have to do the kind of thing these 2 are doing in terms of offering immersive, deep experiences that you can't get on other platforms. So in that sense, this is how in my mind it ties in. It's not just the storytelling part of it. It's also how do we offer an experience that's not on the platform, which are like gigantic, way beyond the scale. I think the other interesting part of the trust bit, which is directly related to the newsroom, is that we are going to see deep fakes, deeper fakes, deepest fakes, whatever. We're going to see a wave of that.
What does all this mean? Fake, deep fake?
So the notion, okay, so deep fake is the notion that, we have seen, it's very easy to compose a fake text news. Now you can make videos that are fake, where real people seem to be talking, right? And the most famous thing that was viral was Obama saying something which he never said. Right? You can synthesize voice, you can make use videos, and we are going to see a lot of that. And in the long run, maybe people will get skeptical. My belief is that ultimately the only solution to fake news will be when people get skeptical of all news, right? And so then, the biggest.
Aren't we here already? Aren't we there already?
I don't think so. I think people, again, I don't think that everybody. I mean, fundamentally, I still think that the citizen or the reader is our only real solution, long-term solution to figuring out fake news. Right? In that, the newsrooms can use technology and other things to, signal that, like deep watermarking. There could be other ways of, I'm going to try and avoid the word blockchain, but there could be other technologies that, because I don't know what it even means now. But essentially, trust in information, whether it's news or anything, is going to be heavily undermined, right? And, newsrooms will be unable to function. I mean, BBC had a great example recently of some fake survey going out, which was not done by the BBC at all, in Karnataka. And this is going to happen across the board all the time. So, if I had to think about technology, those are the two.
Let's ask the techie. Chirdeep, is there a technological solution to fake news, deep fake news, deeper fake news, and deepest fake news?
It is emerging. You're seeing tools like Google's Claim Review that's coming up. A lot of publishers are adopting that, where you can challenge any other site that's published fake news, right? And what we're also seeing is AI, which used to be hype a few years ago, is getting to be mainstream right now. There's real impact in what's being created. And you can start using that to start suppressing at least the distribution of fake news. Facebook is already doing that. And we would see that any distribution channel, WhatsApp for example, will start looking at, it shows you forwarded, it could show you suspicious, all of that could start happening. A simple thing that you could see is, you'll see that existing organizations with a legacy will not stake their reputation on fake news. You will see the mischief coming mainly from new organizations. And you could start ranking and let new organizations really earn their stripes before they go mainstream and get such a large distribution. That's how you will start tackling fake news.
Let me throw you an ethical dilemma type question. You are a platform person, you are not really a newsmaker. Let's say assume I'm your client, I pay you a lot of money to use your platform, but I use your platform to create and distribute fake news. Is your stance on this a model, that I'm your client, that you're not creating fake news, but I am your client and I use your platform? Or are you active saying, no, you can't use my platform for something like this?
That is a very interesting question. Yes, you cannot take a clear stance on this as something mentioned, which is, can opinions be considered as fake news in that sense, right? You don't know where you can clearly classify. If you're misrepresenting facts, that is something that we would not want to partner with. That's our own reputation would go down with that. So that's not something that we would like to partner with.
Why would your reputation as a platform go down? If I'm a news outlet and I use your platform, who knows that I'm using your platform? The consumer, in terms of the consumer.
It's the conscious, right? We know that we're using our platform. I think it's more to do with that.
Irrespective of the fact that we have a client-vendor relationship, you'd intervene and say, don't do this?
I think it's a grey line and a clear black and white part. When you are in the black and white part where you are misrepresenting facts, that would be crossing the line. When you are the opinion articles, you really can't do anything about that. You're entitled to your opinion.
Francesca, similar question to you. From where you sit at The Guardian, how serious is the problem of fake news and bull? What do you at The Guardian do about it?
Well, I mean, we've got a very established method of journalism and of fact-checking. So we apply the same standards of journalism as we always have done. That's why we employ and train the journalists in-house that we do.
Is the solution then a human solution? Do you see a technological solution to the problem of fake news?
Not to fake news. I see technological things like AI being taken into newsrooms, for sure. That's not something that we do at The Guardian at the moment. I don't see that being a solution to fake news. I mean, that's mainly data. AI is, comes through data mainly. That's not going to solve fake news. So, not really.
And you've been heading innovation for the last 10 years at The Guardian. Give us a sense of how you've seen the tech landscape change over the last 10 years, how technologies have changed, and what's likely to happen in the next few.
Well, I came to The Guardian 11 years ago when we were just starting up podcasting there. And I ran our podcasting team, moved into kind of interactive, immersive, interactive journalism, then into VR. I think from my personal perspective, what's interesting is how long it takes for the technologies to really become mainstream. So it was obvious that podcasting was a good idea 11 years ago, but the technology, we had iPods, we had to transfer MP3s onto them. It was a real faff. It's only now where you have them on your phones, you can stream programs that actually now people actually know what podcasts are and downloading them. And it's the same with AR and VR. It's early technology now. These big clunky headsets are not going to be adopted really quickly. But I think what's interesting for journalism is what it affords the organization. So it means that we can be telling our stories in different ways. So, I guess from my perspective, it just takes longer than you think for these things. I mean, we're talking small scale here. We're talking a decade, like you were talking about, the revolution of the newspaper industry. That also took a while to get going. It's just we're impatient now. We see VR, we expect everyone to have the headsets the next year. When it says 2016 is going to be the year of VR, everyone's going to have these headsets. They don't. They're not going to. And it's going to be the same with smart speakers. It's going to be the same with robotics. It just takes a while for these technologies to really develop, and it also takes a while for journalism to adopt them appropriately.
All right, let's talk about adopting these technologies. Like Francesca pointed out, VR still comes with clunky headsets, whether it's Oculus or it's the HoloLens or the bold experiment with Google Cardboard. Vikas Pandey, next question to you. One of the big drivers let's call it Internet 2.2, which is video, Skype, chatting. The two big drivers were the earlier round of the Internet was war. The Cold War pushed us to develop the Internet, and pornography drove a lot of innovations in video chatting. What's going to drive the innovations in VR and AR? Is it going to be porn and war again?
There's no straight answer to this. As Francesca said, every year it's like 2016 is going to be the year of VR. I've been listening to it since 2015. It hasn't happened. But I totally agree. You have to be patient with technology. In Indian context, I can talk about a lot of newsroom are still reluctant to invest in VR. And the reason is for editors, there is no clear takeaway. Like if we do a VR film, where the numbers are going to come from, there aren't that many expert studios who can produce good films. So there is clear lack of content. Having said that, we at the BBC, wherever we have taken our VR films in film festivals or in colleges, people have been quite excited. And for a lot of them, our films were their first VR experience. And after coming out, there was one question, it was unanimous, where can we consume more content coming from India? So both things have to go hand in hand. It has to be tech becoming simpler and content creators adopting to the technology. They both have to go hand in hand. It can't be that headsets become cheaper and less clunky, but there's not content. So they both have to go hand in hand.
I also think it's probably going to be about tools rather than content. It's going to be communicating with your family who are abroad and feeling like you're in the same room. Most of the internet that we use is functional tools. It's not about full content. And so I think that when we can start to be in the same place as the people that we want to hang out with and to use the technology like that, then it'll become very mainstream. But just expecting publishers to be the ones who pioneer this and get everyone to use it, I think is unrealistic.
Can I just add
one point?
I agree with it. We experiment a bit with FIFA World Cup, and we had some of the matches being broadcast in VR. it was a bit clunky to begin with, but most people who watched had only positive things to say. So I agree with it. It's when it becomes part of your daily life, whether you're interacting with your friends or watching your sports, just like mobile phones are today, you will see tech getting simpler and it will change. At least I believe it will.
Samir Patil, is VR and AR in news a solution looking for a problem?
Yeah.
We have the tech and we have the headsets and now we want to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Almost every science fiction film you see has got a beautiful hologram where you click a button and an entire news landscape appears in front of you. You can walk through it, touch it, turn it. How long before that becomes reality and we bypass headsets altogether, that you can perceive it with your plain eye and ear?
So let me answer the question scientifically. I think the biggest AR success in a way, and I don't know if you will define it as AR, was Pokemon, because it sort of mixed the digital world with the physical world in a way.
And that didn't take any time for adoption. Nobody needed patience within a matter of days.
So if at all I have right now, I think AR and VR is just sort of solution looking for a problem, at least when it comes to news or even mass interest media. But I think the two things that will have to, or maybe three, because she said one of them is the tool, is when it meets the mobile phone and when it's very, very simple. Like it needs to be things that are useful, things that you can use on the phone, and it's invisible. You don't even know it's AR. Most people probably wouldn't think of Pokemon as AR, but to me that was the most cleverest sort of application of it. So I think we need dramatically simpler on the phone, and then maybe something.
I think it's probably post-mobile phone, isn't it? I think it's probably post-mobile phone.
It's post-mobile.
That's what I see it as being.
We don't know what that device or that ecosystem is going to be.
Whether it's wearables or, whatever.
So, Chirdeep, what's going to be the killer app that's going to boost the adoption of VR and AR in traditional media, specifically news media? What's going to be the Pokemon Go for the news industry?
I don't know. I've not seen something that's so immersive right now. I think Guardian is doing a fantastic job with their Guardian VR, where you are in a position to actually experience this entire thing. Right? I think travel industry is clearly using VR for putting people in a particular place. So you could be in Vairag, Jordan, and actually see the desert out there. And exactly echoing at what everybody said, I think it's the problem with the clunky headsets. The moment you could have VR with just putting on your goggles, I think it would go mainstream.
Well, Google tried that with the Google Glass and failed miserably at it. Is it an early attempt or?
I think it's evolution. You look at smartphones back in 2002 and they started well early on, right? Nothing changed until iPhone came.
And 3D cinema released in the 80s failed but came back in the 2000s with a less clunky avatar. Alright, let me go back to Vikas Pandey. I'm now going to go into audio. We have technologies like voice search or what's called ubiquitous listening. And there were recent reports of Barbie dolls which listened to children's talk and transmitted it back to an evil Barbie server. And parents were concerned that why are dolls listening to what my children are saying? Where is that line between the convenience of having voice search and having devices in your house that can listen to you versus devices that are just simply snooping on you and giving you the kind of news that you want to hear?
I think like everything else, we have to just remember one word: responsibility. So whether you're making VR
whose part?
I think from content creators, it can be really empowering tool. Whether it's like we are also experimenting with voice, and we ran a few internal experiments, and we found that a lot of time, for example, if you're listening to a news story and you don't know the background, you have the ability to pause it and say, tell me what happened in Assam in 2013, and you can come back to your main story. Or you can ask supplementary questions. So it can be empowering, but of course responsibility has to be there. How much data you are using, how you are using it to inform what sort of news you want to provide, how you want to present your content. So with any piece of technology, if any newsroom is responsible enough in how you're going to use it and how far you're willing to go, I think there shouldn't be any problem.
That's easy for you to say. You're the BBC, you're very responsible, but who's going to adjudicate responsibility? Won't that be a big ethical issue? You're saying people should be responsible. What happens if they're not?
Well, then it boils down to individual content creators, individual journalists, because even when we are talking about things like fake news, we are all in the same space. But I always ask this question, how much we as individual journalists are doing to counter fake news? Like he mentioned this BBC survey thing, and I spotted early in the morning, and by afternoon, within the BBC, not a lot of people were tweeting it out that this is fake. It had to be some other website to report it. So it ultimately boils down to individual responsibility, and then companies and media companies. Every piece has to work together to counter it.
Alright, so we have fake news once again. Samir, another question on fake news. So I pick up a really good newspaper. Not scroll, I still pick up physical newspapers. I read scroll on my phone. And I see an ad for a washing powder that claims to wash whitest. Right? The newspaper has not verified that claim. The advertiser doesn't take too much effort to tell me what his or her background research is, what the claims are based on. So for all intents and purposes, it is fake news, and a newspaper carries it, but puts it inside a border and says, this is news, but this I don't really care about. But I'm going to sell both in the same page at the same time. Isn't all advertising fake news? And why then is fake news such a big deal? If a political party wants to embed that inside a news article and is willing to pay the price, what is the material philosophical difference between the two?
Well, I mean, I think the answer is in your question, right? Because most people know the difference between an ad and what is not. They expect not to be an ad. In fact, it's interesting you gave this example. One of the earliest newspapers bust happened because, I don't know if you remember the history of it in the 1890s and early 1900s when the newspaper boom happened in the US. The first investigative reporting was about fake advertisement for your kind of this product which you whitens your teeth or something, and it brought the newspaper down with it. And the separation of ads and editorial content started. So fake news is not new. We've always had this problem. I think advertising and labeled advertising is a very easy way for most people to understand this is an advertisement and this is not. I think if I take a step back, I think the challenge is that, I will give the example of how think of fake news or bad information or even information as a public health problem. And if you think of the public health problem which we solved over a very long period of time, it required many moving parts to come into play. Right? It was not like saying that some algorithm should solve it or some tech to solve it. It's like saying one pill should solve all diseases.
Absolutely.
Right? If you think of it as a public health problem, and let me flop this analogy a little bit because it's a little complicated. 3-4 big things had to evolve before we could fight, the biological infections. You needed to have patient education. Washing of hands was far more important in solving than in any single medicine. I still think that our real thing is to educate and keep sort of reminding citizens. That's one. Second, you had hospitals and all other kinds of treatment and things that happen. To me, the equivalent is we have Editors Guild, we have lots of organizations. I don't know why the Press Information Bureau would not regularly debunk false news that at least they agree is false. Right? There may be many other institutions that can be retrofitted to perform the functions of looking at fake news. Then you had other conventions, like you have the Ad Council in your particular example. You have other conventions that have emerged. There is no perfect solution. And then at the back of it, there is lots of research. Obviously, there are pharmaceutical companies trying to solve diseases. I think what is happening with the fake news and bad information problem is, I think news media is a tiny fraction of it. Like a lot of fake news has nothing to do with news at all. Right? Then the other thing is the last in first blame problem, right? So it's the, whatever the latest technology, WhatsApp is responsible for it. And I think we need to look at it as a much broader thing, and it takes some sort of, and again, I don't think there is any single part, but there are very obvious big parts that today could play a role in sort of fighting it, right? So sorry for a long...
No, I like the public health analogy. I think it fits perfectly. It took that doctor, I think his name is Semmelweis, the Swiss doctor, about 40 years to convince doctors to wash their hands.
Yeah.
Right? It took 40 years to convince medical professionals that not washing hands transmits diseases, and he single-handedly reduced, I think, childbirth deaths because of his persistence. Right, back to you, Francesca. How is news regulated in the UK? Is there a government? He spoke about the public health system, the public health analogy, and the ecosystem that you need. Vikas spoke about individual responsibility. How is news regulated, and should it be regulated any differently?
This is outside my particular area of expertise because I look at virtual reality and emerging technologies, and we very much work within the Guardian ecosystem. We have lawyers who help us make sure that we're not libelous. And so, we very much hold ourselves to account. The government making sure that we're not libeling anyone, and our own systems of values.
And clearly you haven't gotten into any trouble with the government, and the Ofcom hasn't made that call to you. Let me move to the next question for you. In the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, I remember multiple people tweeting about newspapers, and I think the Guardian was referenced, saying that you talk about Cambridge Analytica and the targeting of people and understanding their political tastes and only serving them up. But the Guardian's advertising and marketing team also targets readers of the Guardian for admittedly more benign reasons. One of the things that you do is you ask people to donate if they like the content of the Guardian to keep journalism alive. How is that targeting any different, and is targeting the reader a concern for you?
We don't target people as in find out their demographics and send them specific adverts. We do advertise for contributions on almost every single page of The Guardian. I mean, like all newspapers, like the whole media, we are struggling to find new revenue models. So for the last few years, we've been looking at whether we can keep ourselves open, so make it free to everyone to be able to read and watch and listen to, but whether we can be supported by the people who read our content. So we're currently investigating what that kind of donations model looks like. We're very, very clear when we advertise, saying, we're very glad you've come to our site. Thank you for reading our paper. If you like our journalism, please give us money.
And the Guardian, of course, is an old and venerable institution, and you're in the most, I'd say, modern wing of that institution with innovation, AR and VR. How do you teach old dogs new tricks? How do your veteran journalists cope with you pushing them to do stories in VR and AR? Are they resisting you tooth and nail?
That's an interesting question, and something I've seen evolve over the decade that I've been in the organisation. When I started up, one of my first jobs was to train everyone in how to use microphones, how to record pieces, how to make little radio features for our podcasts. We got them presenting little TV pieces for our video, and now I'm working with them on VR pieces. And I think what I've found throughout all of those different mediums is that some journalists love it. All they want to do is come up and be on a video or get involved in a VR project. Some people have found themselves natural radio presenters but hate to be in front of the camera. Some are really natural in front of the camera. I just don't think you can say, I would say as someone coming into a 200-year-old newspaper and trying to do the kind of work that I do is to be pretty flexible. Don't expect all your journalists to become radio presenters immediately or understand VR, but to try and get to know individuals. We've got a wonderful science writer who just understood what VR was about, and she came to us with a piece around forensics. She said, what happens if we make a crime scene and you have to figure it out using finding out the latest bits of forensics technology? She understood it. She understood that VR is a game, it's experiential, but she didn't know then how to make it, but she just understood it. But other journalists don't. So I think you need to work with the people that are in your organisation.
Vikas Pandey, same question for you at the BBC, teaching old dogs new VR tricks. Difficult challenge or cakewalk or somewhere in between?
Yes and no. When we started, I think the first time in 2015, I mentioned that we need to do something in VR space in India. We were already doing some bits in the UK. It was difficult. I sort of personally, the strategy I use is when you're speaking to editors, people who are not into VR spaces, you offer some sort of solution. You could just go and say, oh, this is a new bit of technology and we got to use it. The response often is lukewarm. But you say, this is going to solve this problem. For example, we are known to be really old, laid-back organization, but if we do VR, we will kind of be accepted as an organization which is trying new techniques, especially in India. So that's a solution to a problem that every journalist will talk about in India. Oh, BBC's known for radio, so laid back, and younger audiences are not coming. And here is a solution to it. They will warm up to the idea much more quicker than just saying, okay, there's this new tech and we must experiment with it. So you offer a solution and people warm up to it.
What's the average age of your team?
Right now, after we've expanded a lot in 4 new Indian languages, I have to say it's 30. Earlier it used to be 50.
It used to be 50, down to 30. All right, that's the curse of this millennial juggernaut. Everybody wants to hire millennials, target millennials. The rest of us seem to be
It's
ceasing.
not bad. I have to say, I have met a lot of, journalists who have been around for 20 years, really warming up to the idea of VR, and 25-year-olds saying, this is not going anywhere. It will fizzle out like one of those things. I don't want to do it. So it's really not dependent on, age. It depends on individuals.
Right. Okay, we have another 10 or 15 minutes, but I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience before I get concluding remarks from the panel. So if you have a question, now's your time to ask it. No hands up? Yes.
Hello. First of all, introducing myself. I'm Deepit. I'm one of the founders of a news app called InShorts. My question is that, we've always seen that media organizations tend to, when there are new formats for media consumption available to users, media organizations kind of, there's a trail, there's a big delay in them adopting it. So how can media organizations prepare themselves to be more agile? Because the space of technology innovation or format innovation will only speed up from now on. So how can media organizations or traditional media organizations make themselves more agile when it comes to, culturally more agile when it comes to adopting new formats?
All right. I'm going to throw this question to a member in the audience. So we have R. Jagannathan in the audience. He's worked in both traditional media and in modern media, and he's an old school journalist, retrained in the new school. If you can get the mic to Jaggi here. Jaggi, would you care to take a crack at that question?
I think there are different formulae. I think one of the ways to do it is to have a lot of people outside your media organization who are specialists in something, and you can also have people internally who can do different things and different things. I think we are going to move towards a gig economy. So I think increasingly, organizations will have as many people outside it as people inside it. So you don't necessarily have to train the old dogs to do new tricks, but you need to get new dogs
from the outside.
Old tricks also. Yeah.
All right. Samir, same question to you.
Yeah, there's this old joke that companies don't innovate, markets do, and I think my addition to Jaggi's point is that old dogs don't learn new tricks, then there would be no old dogs.
The market will force the old dogs to learn the new tricks.
Enough of a pressure like that. But I do think it is a specific question for a specific company. Yeah, but I think overall we need not worry about the readers getting the innovation. It will happen.
And InShorts is a modern technology company. Why are you concerned about traditional media companies? You're the one who's destabilizing the traditional media companies. They should learn.
You should talk to them, unfortunately.
All right. So you still need to negotiate with them. Yeah.
But I think this question is a really interesting one because, I think large organizations tend to go into these things, very wholeheartedly, right? We're going to do video now. We're going to have 40 video producers in, and we're not often using these kind of agile techniques, which I think we should be. So I think looking at the kind of sprint methodologies, who we're having in teams working together, whether you separate all the developers from all the journalists, whether you have small teams experimenting, I think is a really good idea, because I think otherwise we can end up investing huge amounts in new different types of technology without, which is a huge risk. So I think we can be learning from places outside journalism to be trying to figure this out.
Yeah, Chirdeep, go ahead. Clearly a popular question. Everybody wants to take a crack at it.
So if you are a very large media organization, very likely that you would have a big development team doing all of this, right? But we do see that, as Mr. Jaggi said, there will be a lot of parts that are given out to partners, some parts which are internal that you're looking at. Your design, your experience to users, all of that is something that publishers want to control. But there will be rise of platforms, there will be, the WordPress is increasing with the number of plugins, there will always be different types of platforms that help you be agile. We at Quintype are also doing something similar over here. There's our publishing, and we would see that publishers particularly will have a plethora of options to start getting onto this format. And all of these, the tech part of it, there will be partnerships with anyone who's creating. And the creators will be the Google, the Facebook, the innovators out there with different formats. And you will automatically have this when you keep that across all publishers. That will be much faster than each publisher building it for themselves.
Yeah, yes, two more questions. Can we get a mic across? Yeah, go ahead.
One thing, doesn't the fact that platforms are becoming more powerful than the voices that they pervade, whether it's a Google or one of those Facebook or anything, they are actually becoming the new media platform, media. They are becoming media basically. But doesn't that worry you that it can actually kill every media, every kind of media, because you're all now dependent on these guys to do anything you want to do?
Samir?
It could be for anybody.
So Facebook, Google, WhatsApp, which started as pipeline companies or platform companies, are now de facto media advertising content companies.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, that is definitely true, right? So, I mean, the big reality for most media companies is that while advertising is increasingly going to digital, 80-90% of this
goes to the top 3.
But I think we are at a different point now. So, I think even that has played out and it's very clear. So, whoever now is remaining in the media field has to essentially figure out what their role is. And I think there is a role. I think these distribution companies themselves will probably want to rethink their role, as we saw with Facebook in distributing media. But I think we will go back to the old situation where you need to have an audience. You can't talk about traffic. You need to have somebody who wants to read Jaggi or wants to read Vivek. I think that is not going to change. I don't think that fundamentally these platforms are producing anything anybody wants to read. Maybe they want to see some photos and videos. So I think the old role of media remains. The question is, how do you make it work when most of your money is out of the system? So,
Vivek?
Hi. Fantastic discussion. So congratulations on that. You guys talked about augmented reality and virtual reality. Now, Indian media houses, if you look at, are yet to move on to, something as basic as a podcast. Okay. And, if you ask journalists to do a short video, there is huge resistance. Editors are not ready for it. I mean, Jaggi here is a very, he's a dynamic, flexible editor, open for new technology. But most editors are extremely insecure about, people doing all these things. And so, I mean, we've sort of talked about all this, but I don't see it happening. This is an Indian context, perfectly Indian context.
Let me qualify that question. When Sridevi died, almost every news channel virtually recreated the bathtub, her floating body, the glass of wine. If they had access to 3D technology and VR, you would have been in that bathroom while Sridevi died. While they don't do it for important stories, they would do it for weirdly flamboyant stories like that. It was. I'm not commenting on the tackiness or the aesthetic quality of it, but we came pretty close to a virtual reality experience with anchors being in that bathroom, observing that bathtub, observing where she could have cracked her skull, where she died, how many seconds it took for her to drown. A weird level of morbid curiosity. So maybe it's going to be stories like that that's going to drive editors to say, this is going to bring in an abnormal number of morbid viewership. So that's why we're going to do it. Back to you, Samir, if you want to take a crack at that.
Yeah, so I think there are 2-3 part answer to that. I think one is the classic model of everything and all services, this demand and supply. And the challenge in India is to create supply before there is demand, which is fundamentally something you have to do in India, is difficult because people do not fund it, right? So one reason is just purely economic. There is no provable demand for podcasts, to take one example. So I happen to know a bunch of people who have tried it. Maybe that's not the use case that works in India. We don't have long drives where people are sitting in silence, they're noisy, whatever the reason may be. So I'm skeptical there is unmet demand, to put it in. The second is that we are all able to access international, like there also as many hands went up on Game of Thrones ads, and this is of course the dynamic of this room. But the fact is there's so much international content available that may be fulfilling whatever there is demand there is, right? And this is always going to be like, we joke sometimes like the Facebook of India is Facebook, the Google of India is Google. We haven't, because of our English speaking, whatever policy choices and all of that, we are in a place where a lot of the cutting edge demand is already met by global suppliers. I think these are the boring reasons why. I would also like to say, nobody gives us money to do this, so that's one big reason why.
Alright, we have time for exactly one more question, or I'm going to take closing remarks. Yes, the lady in the
Hi there. There was a very interesting remark made about Pokemon Go and how overnight it just became a sensation. I mean, I think what's really important is the fact that it was tapping on nostalgia marketing, right? It was in a generation, and the objective of that was, at the end of the day, to revive Nintendo and to see how we can take it on a whole new sphere. We spent the last hour talking about the importance of technology in news, where the reality is that most brands look towards institutional organizations like the media on how to tell really good stories. We've forgotten to talk about storytelling and the fundamentals of that, to be honest with you. And from the panelists, I would love to hear that in the media space that you are, and as responsible media institutions, don't you think that you're really getting lured into technology and the focus of technology, whereas you should be really reviving the conversation on good storytelling?
Let me throw that question to Francesca. You did tell the story of solitary confinement, and that's the award-winning virtual reality show.
One of
your many
award-winning pieces.
And that was a compelling story of what it feels like to be in solitary confinement. So, Francesca?
I'm doing a longer talk, I think, in about an hour, which I'm really hoping I can talk much more about story and creativity and use of interactivity and use of different environments. So if you're interested in that, please come along to that. We've been experimenting in a lot of first-person storytelling. I was really interested in what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes. And so we've spent the last 2 years looking at what it looks like, or actually what it feels like, looks like, to be in the position of an American inmate in a solitary confinement cell, and the psychological implications, what it's like to be a baby and have your eyes develop and the colours develop, what it's like to be on a crime scene and be the forensics expert, those kind of things. And we've experimented. Some of them have been more successful than others, but the actual aim over the last 2 years has been very much around what can this do for us in terms of storytelling? What are techniques that work? What don't? Does filming work better than animation? All of those kind of things. And hugely interesting, and I think really promising as well for what it can bring to journalism. I do not want to use it as a fad. And when we think of stories, the first question is, does this have to be virtual reality? Because if it doesn't, it should be a film, it should be a podcast, because it's really expensive making VR. Not that many people are going to watch it. So there has to be a kind of critical reason for you to be making it in that form.
All right, my last question, same question to all for panelists. I think we have about 2-3 minutes left. So organizations like Bloomberg, Washington Post, AP and the others have already started having robots write basic, admittedly easy data-driven stories about, I think this FIFA World Cup had a few robot-written stories. Bloomberg does it regularly for financial data because a number of variables are similar. So my question to you, and I would like the answer in the length of one tweet. This is your tweetable quote. Does this mark the beginning of the end of the traditional journalist?
No, but it would help journalists collect that data. You don't need to do... I'm going to go a little over a tweet.
Tweets are 280 characters now, so go ahead.
So traditionally, you had a lot of, you had either interns or folks on contract working to collect the data, and then somebody is making meaning of this data and telling a compelling story. Now machines can collect that data for you, right? There's a typical example of Fox Sports, which ingested a whole bunch of FIFA World Cup videos and could clearly segregate when a goal was scored and when a red card was flagged. And that you can get machines to do rather than get humans to spend their time doing it. And that improves the level of journalism itself in the way we see it. You get a lot of this data that you can start writing your compelling stories on rather than spending human capital.
Francesca, the biggest threat to journalism comes from?
I mean, I think that trying to fight technology is impossible. So for us as journalists, it's about how we can utilize it to the most effect, simply.
Samir, the biggest threat to journalism, machine learning, AI, is it going to render the traditional journalist sort of semi-relevant?
Not really. I don't think it will have any impact. I think it may make on the margins journalism more interesting by taking away the drudgery of the work that today requires, identical as a test and so on. I think you still need whatever we are calling journalism, like reporting new facts, bringing new facts into the public. I'm really seeing that completely.
Because how long before we see a completely virtual news anchor who's not a real person, who's completely Sophia the robot being a news anchor?
I hope
will
never.
Never argue with her editor and sort of be.
I hope never. Journalists are here to stay, and I really hope they should. I think whether it's AI or VR, they're not your enemy. And I'll go back to what I said previously. If used responsibly, any kind of technology can be your friend. And as he said, it can remove a lot of drudgery and can really inform your journalism. So AI is not a threat. It can be your friend if used responsibly. I think that was a tweet.
Vikas, Samir, Francesca and Chirdeep, thank you very much. Thank you members of the audience for giving us a patient listening.